At sea, start us off. What are we talking about today?
So we're talking about Nemesis issue 2, Rogues Gallery by Mark Millar and Valerio Giangiordano. and we talked about the first one, which was a lot of talking and a quadriplegic sitting in a throne room of blood or something underneath Gotham City, I guess. But issue 2 is a lot of action. It's a lot of it's kind of the origin story for the sidekick character. I think was his name sidekick. It was
Rookie.
something rookie, right?
Hmm.
Yep. And we're seeing him put to task. He's kind of the Robin character, so to speak. We're seeing him evolve, being trained and shaped and molded by Nemesis to be the sort of sidekick that Nemesis would like to have as he reclaims his power hierarchy in the city.
Yeah, so do you ever want to see or did you ever want to see Robin, but if he was like super edgy and a violent psychopath? This is your
Yes.
this is your comic, and that's basically what we get here. It is as advertised. What you see on the box is what you get. And I think that's the best thing I can say for this comic is that if you picked this comic up, it was because you were on board with this. And this is what you wanted to see out of this anti-superhero book, essentially, this villain Sue. The thing that bugs me the most about this is that when you do this level of villain Mary Sue character trope, at least Batman, because people will like make this, the meme that Batman's kind of a Mary Sue. He always wins. He's always got a plan or contingency for something, and that's there's some truth to that. But Batman is also fallible. Plans of his go awry. He's not always like 100% on top of things. Villains and gangsters will put stuff over on him, and he'll have to come back from it. But Nemesis is always like 10 years ahead of everyone, like at all times. And it's just like, it's by inverting the Batman trope, you've actually created something worse than the trope you were trying to invert. And so it's what you get is just a cavalcade of bodies hitting the floor. And like I said, if you're down for that, this is right up your alley.
You also get very little character development with Nemesis, which is kind of interesting for somebody, you know, featured in his own storyline. You'd think it would be something beyond just all of these events that are transpiring and that he's involved with. He's recruiting this new sidekick. He wants to, I guess, start attacking the superheroes who are now finding a newfound presence and strength in this world, which isn't really shown or even discussed, really. He just mentions it offhand as a justification on why he needs to regroup. And he trains up this sidekick character in essentially a montage because he has him develop all this expertise that he needs him to possess to be able to uh, follow through with his plans. But it all happens so abruptly and so quickly. The character doesn't age in the story, maybe even a few months before he's got all this expertise in different martial arts and being, undercover and all these other aspects of villainy that he needs to now know and master to be working with Nemesis. So there's definitely some some shortcuts being made here in the storytelling, which is an interesting approach.
I would say it does look like Nemesis picked the right sidekick or the right person to become his sidekick because we see Rookie um, kill about 15 or 20 cops, I guess, right? Leaving the courthouse uh, at from the stand of his own courtroom hearing, and through several stories of armed police, sometimes without any weapons. Curiously, uh, yeah. So I guess he's already badass, I suppose, and he just needs to be beaten and abused emotionally by Nemesis for a few more pages, so that he could be a proper villain sidekick. I, I thought it was interesting. Like we talked last issue with issue 1 about how 3D models used as a base reference for characters. I think like how it can be a valid approach if you've got a bunch of people sitting and or laying as quadriplegics or talking, that sort of thing. But would you and it remain to be seen, I think is what we said after issue 1, if you can use that same kind of 3D model reference and do a bunch of action. And I think this was a great test of whether or not that strength really holds through. And I think it kind of fell on its face a bit. I don't know if you noticed, but there's no wrinkles in any clothing. That's a good sign in this story that if we're looking at, you know, someone who doesn't have a lot of time and they're not looking at reference that is indicating how clothing folds because they're looking at 3D models where clothing never folds. So it just kind of looked like Barbie dolls and Ken dolls running around,
So
smacking each other, and yeah.
that is interesting. I do think that Gian Giordano is got a knack for sleight of hand, though, because if you're
Mm.
using that kind of art style, and I've seen some other artists who make it so glaring that all you can pay attention to is the fact that there's just 3D crap on the page. But he's put enough flair, whether it's bullets flying across the page or other special effects happening, that I think it holds up until you start scrutinizing it. So if you're just kind of reading it over quickly and digesting it super fast, I think, which these comics are very much made for, I think that sleight of hand elevates it maybe a little bit, or disguises the flaws. Do you think? Because like there are other artists I can that or other comics I've read where the 3D art just is so freaking glaring, and this one, it's almost like it's the second take where it starts to, I think, really show those flaws.
Let's take a brief pause to hear from the awesome creators joining us today and find out what cool projects they're currently working on.
Hey guys, if you love sword and sandal historical fiction with a healthy dose of ancient Roman and Egyptian fantasy mixed in, then check out Kyrie. We've got 450 pages printed so far, and a fourth book on the way. Order your books today at curiecomic.com.
Modern day, classic superhero storytelling. Get The Adventures of Omega Girl, issues 1 through 5, now on Indie Planet.
Thank you to our awesome creators, and now back to the video.
It's some of the better use of it that I've seen. I just don't think if this is top quality, if this is a top quality approach to that, I don't think it holds the slightest candle to what we saw with Absolute Superman, for instance, just visually in terms of art. But that's just me.
Yeah, and I noticed that the panels occupy a lot more space, so there too are a lot of shortcuts being made where there just isn't as much art, I would say, as you would get in Absolute Superman, where every panel was highly detailed and they would try to pack as much information as possible onto the page with the paneling. Whereas here, there's a lot more empty space, I noticed, in between the characters and in between the scenes. I was taken aback also by the character designs. So, for example, he looked at Rookie when he first comes out with his costume and he goes badass. And I'm looking at this image and it's like, well, he's just wearing pajamas and a cape and his junk is bulging through. Where is exactly the badass characteristic here?
Yeah, how do you define what looks like a cool superhero or supervillain? Is it just different colors on the exact same outfit endlessly? It's just spandex and cape? I don't get it. Can someone explain what makes a good superhero or supervillain outfit?
Thank you for
Literally,
asking. Preparing for this my entire life.
Yeah, please.
What we're looking for is iconicity. Okay. In some cases, this is the chevron or emblem. Okay. Something that boils down what this character is. And it can be, in fact, just an insignia, but there's usually, even if without an insignia, what we're looking at is creating an icon that draws the identity of that character together, so the character becomes more than just a character on a page in a piece of fiction, but becomes an icon or an archetype. And so Batman is a Batman. Like they're like the cowl, the insignia, the cape, all of these things come together. And Superman with his insignia and his strongman aesthetic with the underoos on the outside. That's important. He's not just a sci-fi spaceman. Like there is this coming together, this blending of elements. Doctor Doom with his iconic mask still shows his eyes and just this little tinge of his face in places to show that he's a scarred man underneath this medieval looking armor, to draw together that this guy is anachronistic and kind of mysterious. So I completely agree though with both of you that moment of Rookie and saying, "Oh wow, you look so good and amazing," and I'm like, a character who's got two guns is essentially a superpower. We figured this out with the Shadow back before superheroes were a thing in the pulps, where you had the big hat and the scarf. Like before superheroes, people had figured out how to nail aspects of this, whether it was Doc Samson or the Shadow, the Phantom, and I don't know. It's almost like Mark Millar is determined to forget all the lessons that we have learned throughout the mining of this entire genre.
I also wanted to mention that this issue also, if we're going to talk about the fact that this is edgelord superhero storytelling, it didn't bring the edge. The first issue had him biting faces and doing very morbid things, draining live bodies so that he could fill pools of blood to restore himself. The most edgy thing that was happening here is he was joking with Rookie that it's time for them to copulate,
Yeah.
to consummate their new formed partnership. So
that's
Such a
not even
bizarre
edgy.
moment.
That's not even edgy for Nemesis. Nemesis number, the first series of Nemesis has, like I said, one of the most vile things that's ever happened in comics. So even for its own continuity, this is kind of soft. And I wonder if this is indicative of Millar, because he's like, the first Nemesis was years ago, right? And so like he's aged a bit. We're getting an older, ostensibly wiser, I don't know if that's true, wiser Mark Millar. And so this is him being edgy at, a much more advanced stage in his career, which does bring up the one thing that I do think is somewhat interesting about Nemesis, which isn't Nemesis, but is in fact the group of vigilantes whose lives have been ruined by Nemesis, who are coming together to form a revenge squad, and essentially to try and take him down. And like what motivates them, and the tech that they're assembling, and the fact that they're kind of a little bit of the underdogs in a way. The nurse in the first issue who got blinded gets given some superhero tech so that he can hopefully fight on even par with Nemesis. That's actually much more interesting to me for the most part than anything going on in Nemesis and inverse Robin.
Yeah. Did that kind of, was there something kind of exciting about that, of just seeing like some cool superpower, like, I mean, they're kind of sci-fi technology superpowers, but seeing those superpowers given to people who are clearly, as you said, underdogs,
and motivated by revenge.
yeah, and motivated by revenge in a world that doesn't have room for them, has room for Nemesis to kind of be on top about as soon as he is no longer a paraplegic, but or quadriplegic, but it remains to be seen if there's any room for superheroes of this story. And maybe that's the point. It's not that it's an anti-Batman, like, though he looks like Batman in a way, just an all-white version. He's really just kind of like a maximal villain that really I suppose is going to be a sounding board against which we're going to bounce off some really interesting maybe ideas about what uh, heroes can be like, I suppose. I'm really trying to steel man Mark Millar's approach here. I know he's not typically known for his heroic characters, uh, his fresh faced, positive outlooks on superheroes either. But there could be an opportunity here with these particular superheroes where they're actually going to be. They might become a lot more interesting than Nemesis, even if Nemesis is getting, he's the title character and he's getting 3/4 of each of these issues.
That is that is the most interesting dynamic in these stories, is that usually the superheroes, the dominant presence in the story, Superman and Batman, they overtake everything uh, in each environment that they're in, and they fill the room. They are the core presence there. And all the villains are these subordinate characters that have to work out of warehouses. They get incompetent assistants, to try to help them to bring down the superheroes. They're the tryhards. They're the B team, and they are trying to establish themselves as being uh, in that same weight class as that superhero. This is the reverse of that dynamic, where the superheroes are the B team, and they have to work out of the warehouse, and they have to find these very um, not lofty motivations for the reasons that they do the things that they're doing. They're usually selfishly motivated. And it was an interesting idea to have them be motivated by revenge against the main villain, the dominant presence of this story, the superhero stand-in. So Mark did play with very interesting elements, I think, in establishing um, that conflict between the superheroes and the villains of this story.
I'm just afraid that he's gonna do the rug pull,
Hmm.
and he's just going to effortlessly murder them all. And so this will all have been for naught. And it'll be like, haha, you thought this was gonna matter with this plucky band who are uniting with justifiable, I might add, justifiable grievances against this horrible monster.
He's
And then
done that before, hasn't he?
he's just gonna effortlessly just like cut all their throats, and then it's just gonna leave this sour taste in my mouth.
Isn't
Uh,
that the same that Batman does? He swoops in and he just beats everybody up and sends them to jail. I mean,
Yeah. Wait a minute.
it's the same thing. It's the exact same. There's no difference. Ah.
Yeah.
it's a twist. It's a unique twist on it, and he's very deftly been able to reconfigure those elements in a way that works so that he could put the villain in the superhero role and the superheroes in the traditional
Well,
villain roles.
this is supposed to be a universe where the superheroes have in fact taken over, because like this is part of the Wanted multi or story continuity kind of. But this was the version where, because in Wanted they'd killed all the superheroes, and so it was a world of supervillains. This was basically the inverse of that, where Nemesis is actually like supposed to be on the back foot, and the superheroes are in charge now. We have not seen any of that. The actual
No.
superheroes have not like they're just like they're supposedly in charge and taking kicking butt and taking names. Haven't seen a single one. We just get this plucky band that, like I said, I am interested in. I'm just afraid they're just gonna get subverted, and yeah.
Matt
Yeah.
C, final take.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean you're definitely supposed to think that Nemesis and Rookie are cool. I think that's the way this story world is presenting them as such. You're supposed to be thrilled by their hijinks of murdering people for money, and but you're also supposed to feel for this ragtag team of would be heroes that are assembling, and there you can do both. And he's trying. I think Mark Miller knows enough about what he's doing to know that he wants to do both at the same time. And so it's going to be interesting to see uh, if one of those two take priority. How is he going to make us root for the heroes against a very cool pair of bad guys? That just kind of that feels like some tension that is going to be interesting to see resolve. But he's got me wondering, at least. So that's something.
I have very low expectations or hopes for this. I will say that if you want to kind of like do the sort of like, oh, the super villains are kind of like, follow the supervillain trajectory story. Super Crooks, I enjoyed. That's Mark Miller. So, like I said, I definitely would say check out Super Crooks. It's basically superhero Ocean's 11, but with supervillains essentially. But the type of supervillain that it doesn't like turn your stomach about. They're as to quote the movie, they're proper villains. I like that series. It was a great romp. There is a Netflix anime series of all things. So you can check that out in multiple forms. Much prefer that to Nemesis. I really have I don't have much else to add.
Oh,
Mm. I like the story thus far, the series. I didn't particularly like this issue. I thought the Rookie was kind of a shallow character and very abruptly shoehorned in and occupied half of the story. As you mentioned, Twitless, I did enjoy the superhero characters. I think they are kind of the heart of the story arc that's being driven thus far. And I'm much more interested in seeing what happens with them than in this supposed conflict that's building up with Nemesis and superheroes taking over. So we'll see exactly how Mark Miller lands this plane in subsequent issues.
Thank you very much for checking out the video. Subscribe, like, and stay tuned for more.